I never thought my own family would persuade my husband to leave me for my younger sister, but that's exactly what I overheard them discussing at my parents' house. My name is Sarah. I'm 27 years old. It all started in the 3rd year at the Economics Faculty Library of Boston University. I was searching for a rare monograph when a heavy statistics textbook slipped from my hands. He caught it before it hit the floor. "You're in Professor Harrison's class, right?" he asked, handing me the book. "I've noticed you ask questions. You always stand out from the others." I blushed. I wasn't used to such words. I had hardly ever heard similar compliments in my life. "Yes, that's me, the annoying one who prolongs the lectures," I admitted. "Not annoying at all." He smiled, dimples appearing on his cheeks. "By the way, would you like to grab a coffee? I could tell you about the courses you'll take next year." That's how I met Ethan. That coffee turned into dinner, then movie nights, and soon we were inseparable. For the first time, someone saw the real me, not comparing me to others, not demanding I be someone else. My childhood wasn't easy, although it probably seemed normal from the outside. We lived in a typical Connecticut suburb, in a house with a garden where my father grew exotic varieties of apples, his passion. I had a younger sister, Jenny, 3 years younger than me, with big brown eyes and the ability to get everything she wanted. I realized early on that in our family, she was the sun around which all the planets revolved, and I was just a distant comet, appearing only occasionally. They never said out loud that they wanted a boy, but it was obvious in everything. In the careless way my father kept his father's goalkeeper gloves, in my mother's strange reservations, in the quiet sighs after Jenny's birth. "Maybe the next one will be a boy," I once overheard my mother say. But there was no next one. Complications after Jenny's birth left her unable to have more children. I learned early to be self-sufficient. I had everything necessary: clothes, food, education, but I built a fortress inside myself that no one could breach. Until I met Ethan. After graduation, when Ethan had been working in a consulting firm for a year, and I had just graduated with honors, we rented a small apartment downtown. Nothing special. 2 rooms with a park view, creaky floors, and ancient radiators that hummed at night like a swarm of bees. It was our space. When I brought Ethan to meet my parents, their change in attitude was immediate. "Oh, Ethan!" my mother almost squealed with delight. "We're so happy to finally meet you. You'll come to ours for Thanksgiving, right? And for Christmas, son?" My father patted him on the shoulder like an old friend. "Tell me about your job. Sarah says you're in finance. That's serious business." That word, son, caught me off guard. Of course, they finally got the son they always wanted, albeit indirectly. Meanwhile, Jenny still lived with our parents and hadn't had a serious relationship since college. After a year of living together, during a quiet dinner, Ethan got down on one knee. A ring sparkled in the little box. The world stopped. I said yes before he even finished the question. Ethan and I wanted a modest wedding, intimate, without frills. Of course, my parents demanded a lavish celebration. "It's your special day," my mother insisted. "Don't you want something more memorable?" But we stuck to our plan. Just close friends and family in Ethan's friend's garden. We exchanged vows at sunset, held a cozy dinner, and returned to our apartment as husband and wife. Questions about children began almost immediately after the honeymoon. "So, when should we expect the good news?" my mother asked, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. "We want a grandchild." "We first want to save up for a house," I explained over and over. We want to be financially stable before starting a family." My father just shook his head. "Your mother and I started with very little, and we made it work." Every family dinner turned into a report on how other families were growing. "Have you heard? The Wilsons became grandparents again. Another boy. And the baker's daughter announced she's pregnant. And she's younger than you, Sarah." After 2 years of saving, Ethan and I bought our first house. It was modest, but it was ours. Well, ours and the bank's. The moment I signed the mortgage documents, I knew the questions about children would become even more pressing. And they did. But what I didn't expect was Jenny's announcement. "I'm pregnant," she declared during Sunday dinner, placing a hand on her flat stomach. "It's Jake's." Jake had been her boyfriend for only 6 months, a guy no one in the family particularly liked. But as soon as Jenny said she was expecting, the whole house revolved around the future baby. When little Emma was born, you would think royalty had arrived. My parents remodeled Jenny's old room into a nursery, buying everything of the highest quality, their lives completely transformed for their granddaughter. "Isn't she perfect, Sarah?" my mother cooed, rocking Emma in her arms. "Sarah, don't you want one too?" But the most painful part wasn't my parents' constant hints, but how Ethan behaved with Emma. He would sit on the floor for hours, making funny faces, entertaining her with toys and children's books. "Ethan is so natural with kids," my mother said meaningfully. "He'd make a wonderful father." I started tracking my cycle, taking vitamins, doing everything the future mom sites advised. Month after month, Ethan and I tried, but nothing happened. Meanwhile, Ethan spent more and more time at my parents' playing with Emma. "She's so adorable," he said on the way home. "Did you see how she started to walk? And today, she almost said uncle." After a year of unsuccessful attempts, my parents insisted on medical tests. I agreed just to get them off my back. The day I learned the results changed everything. "I'm sorry," the doctor said gently, "but you have infertility." Those words wounded me deeply. Ethan squeezed my hand, but I could hardly feel anything. The doctor continued talking about options and treatments, but her voice sounded distant. That evening, Ethan and I sat in the kitchen, barely touching our food. "We could consider adoption or IVF," he finally said. "There are options." I nodded, feeling empty inside. How was I supposed to come to terms with this? I decided to tell my family at the next dinner, to do it quickly, like ripping off a Band-Aid. "Mom, Dad," I began when there was a lull in the conversation. "I went to the doctor. I can't have children. I'm infertile." The silence that followed my words was deafening. Then my mother's face twisted. "Infertile!" She spat the word. "What kind of woman can't even do what she was made for?" My father didn't even look at me. "An empty vessel," he muttered. Jenny sat, barely restraining a smile, bouncing Emma on her knee. "Well, now we know who the real woman in this family is." I looked at Ethan, desperately hoping for support, but he just sat there, staring at his plate. Hot, unstoppable tears streamed from my eyes. I pushed my chair back and left. After that evening, I avoided my parents, but Ethan kept visiting them, spending time with Emma, chatting with Jenny, and listening to my parents' advice. He came home full of stories about Emma's milestones and Jenny's culinary triumphs. Every word cut me like a knife. At night, I'd lie awake, listening to his even breathing next to me, wondering if he blamed me, if he regretted our marriage. And then one day, my world completely collapsed. I got home from work earlier than usual with bags of Chinese food, Ethan's favorite, but the house was dark and empty. His car wasn't in the garage. Then my phone buzzed with a social media notification. Jenny had posted a new photo. I usually ignored her posts, but something made me open it this time. When the image loaded, my heart stopped. Ethan sat on my parents' couch, Emma on his lap, and Jenny leaning into his side. All three were smiling. The caption read, "Family time with my favorite people." I grabbed my car keys. All the way to my parents' house, thoughts raced through my head, feverishly replaying every interaction between Ethan and Jenny over the past year. The driveway was full of cars, including Ethan's. I ran up the steps and yanked open the front door. It was unlocked. Voices came from the living room. "Ethan, you know we already consider you a son," my mother was saying. "You deserve to be happy. You're so great with Emma. Jenny is young and fertile. You could have children together. Think about it. Why stay married to—" My mother's voice dropped, but I still heard the disdain. "An infertile woman." I couldn't breathe. This couldn't actually be happening. I burst into the room. Everyone jumped. The scene was like a nightmare. My parents and sister on one couch, Ethan across from them, Emma playing on the floor between them. One big happy family plotting against me. "What the hell is going on here?" My voice sounded stronger than I felt. Ethan had the decency to look embarrassed, but my parents were unyielding. "Sarah," my mother stood, raising her chin. "We're just having an honest discussion about what's best for everyone." "Best for everyone?" I reiterated. "You're persuading my husband to leave me for my sister?" "Someone has to think about his future," my father snapped. "You can't give him what he wants, what he deserves. Jenny can." I turned to Ethan, expecting him to defend our marriage, to say they were crazy. Instead, he was staring at the floor. "Ethan?" My voice broke. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he said quietly. "But they're right." 3 years later, I was sitting in a cafe across from a tall man with attentive gray eyes. Michael worked as a pediatric oncologist, and we had met at a charity event my company organized. "Did you really never want children?" he asked, stirring his coffee. I thought about it. The question no longer caused the sharp pain it once did. "I did," I finally replied. "But life had other plans." He nodded. His gaze expressed neither pity nor judgment. "You know," he said softly, "I have a son. He's 4. His mother died during childbirth." I felt something shift inside me. We continued to see each other. Alex, Michael's son, was a quiet, thoughtful boy with his father's gray eyes. He immediately reached out to me, and I to him. 6 months later, Michael proposed. A month after that, we became a family, him, Alex, and me. I adopted the boy, and he started calling me Mom. One day, 2 years into our family life, I entered a restaurant with Alex and Michael and saw them, Jenny and Ethan. With them was a child, a little girl, not Emma. Clearly, their own child. Jenny noticed me first. A shadow passed over her face, a mix of smugness and anxiety. She whispered something to Ethan, and he turned. Our eyes met across the restaurant. I felt nothing. No hatred, no pain, no regret. Ethan was part of a past that no longer held power over me. We sat at a table on the other side of the room, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw that Jenny kept glancing our way. Their dinner was evidently not peaceful. When I returned from the restroom, I noticed Jenny kissing a waiter in the corridor. I quietly walked by, but she saw me and turned pale. During dinner, Michael noticed my pensiveness. "Is something wrong?" he asked. I told him about Ethan and Jenny, about their betrayal. "And I just saw Jenny kissing a waiter," I added. He looked at me intently. "What do you want to do with this information?" I pondered. Revenge was at my fingertips. It would be enough to approach Ethan or take a photo. I could destroy their lives as they once destroyed mine. "Nothing," I finally said. "It's their life, their problems." He smiled, his eyes warm. "You're stronger for it, Sarah. Better. You always were." We continued our dinner, ignoring them completely. Ethan tried to approach our table when we left, but I just walked by, holding Alex's hand. Outside, the first snow was falling. Alex was hopping around, trying to catch snowflakes on his tongue. Michael put his arm around my shoulders. "Are you happy?" he asked softly. I looked at our son, at the falling snow, at Michael, who loved me, fully and unconditionally. "Yes," I replied, happier than ever. Sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you deserve. Sometimes you have to create your own, with people who choose you just as you choose them. Michael and I chose each other. We chose Alex, and he chose us, with his laughter, his hugs, his trust. That's true family, and I wouldn't trade it for anything else. Did you like the story? Write your opinion in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next interesting story. See you tomorrow.